Imagine it's 30th November 2001. You are a 42-year-old school secretary living in Buenos Aires, Argentina. You rent a narrow apartment above a bakery, and every morning the smell of warm bread rises through the floorboards before the city is fully awake. Your husband drives a used Fiat with one bad door hinge. Your son needs new shoes before the school year ends. And in a glass jar near the sink, you keep a few emergency bills for small surprises. Most months, you deposit part of your pay into a bank branch downtown, because that is what careful adults do when they are trying to build a stable life. On Saturdays, you sit at the kitchen table with receipts, count what came in, count what went out, and feel a quiet pride that your family has stayed disciplined. The television keeps talking about debt, the peso, and political turmoil, but inside your home, the routine still feels solid, like a chair that has held your weight for years. If you have ever wondered why some people seem to become freer as they earn more while others become more trapped, stay with me. What you're about to hear is not a theory. It is a pattern. It has happened in different countries in different decades, under different flags. And if you find value in this kind of historical clarity, subscribing takes 2 seconds and keeps you ahead of what most people never see coming. Then Monday arrives. You hear that the government has limited bank withdrawals to 250 pesos a week for 90 days. The word for this in Argentina became corralito, which meant a little corral, like a pen that keeps animals from moving. And suddenly, the careful life you built feels less like a house and more like a stage set. People who thought they had savings discover that access matters as much as ownership. People who thought they were secure discover that security can vanish without the furniture even moving. That is where the story begins, because financial freedom has never really been about income alone. History shows something colder and much more useful. The people who stay free at almost any income level tend to avoid the same kinds of purchases over and over again. They avoid the house that stretches them thin. They avoid the car that announces success while draining cash every month. They avoid status clothes and shiny upgrades bought mainly to impress strangers. They avoid debt-fueled furniture, gadgets, and comforts that turn tomorrow's paycheck into yesterday's decision. They avoid speculative trophy assets they do not truly understand. They avoid prestige memberships and recurring fees that keep nibbling at them long after the thrill is gone. And above all, they avoid buying a rich-looking life at the price of a free one. Before we go further, there is something important to understand. The thing that ruins people is rarely one giant purchase made in madness. More often, it is a slow stacking of obligations. One bigger room, one nicer car, one premium package, one more monthly payment, one more thing to insure, fix, polish, store, or explain. It feels harmless because each step is small. But a life can become fragile the way a ship becomes heavy, one crate at a time, until the sea it once handled easily now feels dangerous. That is the core mechanism behind this whole video. Financial freedom is not about how expensive your life looks from the sidewalk. It is about how much of your time belongs to you. The less you must earn just to stand still, the more resilient you are when history turns ugly. The more of your income is already promised away, the less room you have when jobs weaken, credit tightens, prices rise, or governments panic. Economists have a phrase, conspicuous consumption. It simply means buying things to be seen buying them. Thorstein Veblen wrote about it in 1899. He was describing the old habit of turning money into a costume. That costume changes with time. In one era, it is a carriage. In another, it is a Cadillac. In another, it is an oversized home, a luxury watch, or a stream of subscriptions you barely use. But the function stays the same. The purchase is not solving a real problem. It is solving a social feeling. And social feelings are expensive. A useful way to think about it is this. Every purchase does one of two things. It either increases your future options, or it reduces them. A tool that helps you earn, save, or stay independent can widen your path. A status purchase that comes with debt, upkeep, and pressure narrows it. Freedom is like oxygen in a room. You do not think about it when there's plenty of it. But the moment it gets thin, it is the only thing you notice. This brings us directly to the first thing financially free people keep avoiding. Even when they could technically afford it, they avoid buying more house than their life can safely carry. In the United States, the great housing boom of the late 1990s and mid-2000s did not begin as a horror story. It began as a dream. Home ownership rose from 64% in 1994 to 69% in 2005. Average home prices more than doubled between 1998 and 2006. Mortgage debt of American households climbed from 61% of GDP, which means the size of the whole economy, in 1998 to 97% in 2006. Houses stopped being just places to live. They started being treated like ladders, vaults, and casino chips all at once. Ordinary families felt rational joining in. A larger home looked like progress. Cheap credit looked like opportunity. Rising prices made even reckless decisions feel intelligent. A young couple could buy at the edge of their means and tell themselves the house would do the heavy lifting. If the monthly payment pinched, they could refinance. If they needed cash, they could borrow against the rising value. It was like building a second floor on a house made of fog. Warren Buffett, who bought his Omaha home in 1958 for $31,500 and stayed there for decades, warned about exactly this kind of fantasy. A house, he wrote, can become a nightmare if the buyer's eyes are bigger than the wallet. That line matters because it cuts through the mood of the boom. The danger was not homeownership itself. The danger was buying a life-size trophy and calling it prudence. Look at what happened next. The National Case-Shiller Home Price Index peaked in July 2006 and did not find its trough until February 2012. From peak to trough, it fell 27.4% nationally. In many local markets, the damage was much worse. And when prices fell, they did not just hit speculators. They hit nurses, electricians, office workers, teachers, and retirees. They had wrapped their balance sheets around one giant illiquid object. Illiquid means hard to turn into cash quickly without pain. A house is wonderful when it shelters you. It is brutal when you need to move, sell, refinance, or survive a job loss at the wrong moment. What did ordinary people experience? They experienced the humiliation of owing more than a home was worth. They experienced moving trucks at dawn, foreclosure notices on front doors, and phone calls they stopped answering. They discovered that square footage cannot comfort you when the payment is due. The bigger kitchen, the extra bathroom, the high-ceiling entrance hall that once felt like a rival now felt like a theater set after the audience had left. And the winners? The survivors were not always the people with the highest salaries. Often they were the people with margin. Margin means breathing room. The family that bought less house than the bank approved. The owner who kept a fixed payment small enough to survive one bad year. The person who cared more about resilience than prestige. Financial freedom does not usually arrive in a mansion. It more often grows in a home that leaves enough money, time, and sleep for the rest of life. Here is something I want you to think about before we go further. If every car, every house, and every upgrade had to be paid in full, in cash, with no monthly payment to hide the true cost, how different would your city look? Drop your answer in the comments. Seriously. Because what I am about to show you next is the part of this story that most people never hear, and it changes everything. The second thing financially free people avoid buying is the brand new status vehicle, and more broadly, the habit of turning transportation into a public performance. To see why, go back to the United States in the 1920s. This was the birth of the modern consumer machine. Henry Ford had already shown that cars could be mass-produced. Alfred Sloan at General Motors saw the deeper prize. He understood that people were not only buying movement, they were buying prestige, novelty, and the feeling of being up to date. In 1927, he pushed the yearly model change, a brilliant piece of business theater designed to make last year's perfectly fine car feel socially old. By 1929, there were nearly 27 million cars on American roads. A quarter of all American families bought a car that year. About 60% bought on credit, often paying interest rates of 30% or higher. The figure matters because it shows the true product being sold. The car was visible. The real sale was time, years of future income signed away for a machine that began losing value the moment it became familiar. And it did not stop with cars. About 60% of furniture and 75% of radios were bought on installment plans. Installment meant paying over time. It felt civilized, modern, painless, but underneath it was a trap hidden inside convenience. The salesman had discovered a powerful trick. Break the price into monthly pieces small enough to feel harmless. And people will buy far more than they would ever buy if forced to feel the whole number at once. This is where history gets uncomfortable. When the economy turned, the object stayed, but the income disappeared. The radio still sat in the corner. The car still waited by the curb. The furniture still filled the room. Yet the payment schedule, cold and mechanical, kept arriving. Debt is like ivy on a wall. At first it looks decorative. Then, one day, you realize it has wrapped itself around the bricks. The ordinary American household in the late 1920s was not foolish in some cartoonish way. It was being trained. Advertisers appealed to prestige and status. Stores offered a faster route to the future. Banks and manufacturers helped people borrow against tomorrow so they could display tomorrow today. That is why financially free people remain suspicious of shiny monthly payments at any income level. They understand that the payment is the purchase. The object is only the costume. Now here is where it gets interesting. The modern version is not really different. It just has better software. In 2025, the average monthly payment for a new car in the United States reached $748. That number is not just about cars. It is about normalization. Once a heavy payment becomes normal, people stop asking the older and more dangerous question. What is this purchase doing to my future room to maneuver? And notice what financially free people often do instead. They buy boring cars and keep them longer. They avoid trying to signal status through a depreciating asset. They know a car can move your body, but it cannot move your net worth in the right direction unless it helps you work. They understand that sitting in a leather seat while your balance sheet weakens is like eating dessert on a leaking boat. This leads to the third part of the story. Financially free people also avoid buying speculative trophies, flashy assets. People chase because they believe somebody richer will always come along and pay more. Japan in the late 1980s is one of the clearest examples ever recorded. During the bubble years, stocks, land, and prestige assets rose into absurdity. The Nikkei stock average climbed toward 39,000 by December 1989. Land in central Tokyo became so inflated, analysts joked the land under the Imperial Palace was worth as much as all of California. And perhaps the strangest symbol of the era was the golf club membership. Golf memberships in Japan, at the peak, could sell for upwards of $3 million. Let that sink in. Not land that feeds you, not a factory that produces, not a share in a business with steady cash flow, a membership card. One company, Ginza Golf Service, built itself around this fever. It bought and sold golf memberships and then lent money to customers, using those same memberships as collateral, which means borrowed money secured by the thing being bought. That worked beautifully while prices kept rising. It was financial alchemy, turning vanity into leverage and leverage into expansion. The company even bought hotels in the United States. Then the bubble broke. Real estate and golf membership prices plunged. Ginza Golf Service entered bankruptcy proceedings under $2 billion in debt. The same mechanism, different country, same result. When people buy trophy assets, mainly because they have gone up, they are not purchasing value. They are purchasing momentum. But momentum is rented. Value is owned. A prestige asset in a bubble is like an ice sculpture at a summer wedding. It can look magnificent. It can make the room gasp. But it is still melting the whole time. What did ordinary people in Japan feel? At first, not catastrophe in the dramatic movie sense. The effect was uneven. Overtime pay fell. Luxury stores reported weaker business. Family budgets tightened quietly. Companies slowed investment. Banks reduced lending. The fever left the system, and with it left the easy confidence that assets would keep doing the work of discipline. The country entered the lost decades, long years of slow growth and balance sheet repair. What you own versus what you owe. When too much of the own side was fantasy and too much of the owe side was real, the reckoning lasted far longer than the party. Most people will never know what you now know. If you're still here, you're not most people. Hit subscribe, because the next section is the part they never put in textbooks. Now observe what all of these cases have in common. In America before 2008, people stretched for bigger homes because rising prices made the stretch feel wise. In America before 1929, people stretched for cars and radios because monthly payments made the cost feel small. In Japan, before 1990, people stretched for trophy assets because prestige itself had become collateral. Different goods, same machine. The machine runs on three fuels. First, status pressure. Human beings are social. We watch each other for clues about success. Sellers do not just offer products. They offer identity. The car is not transportation. It is arrival. The house is not shelter. It is proof. The branded watch or designer jacket are not sold as objects. They are sold as a shortcut past insecurity. Second, borrowed money. Credit pulls future earnings into the present. Once a culture begins financing ego, it creates fragility on a mass scale. Borrowed money is a lever. A lever makes lifting easier, but it also makes falling harder. Third, fixed costs. This is the silent killer. A fixed cost is a bill that keeps coming whether you feel rich or not. Big mortgage, big car payment, club dues, insurance, maintenance, streaming packages, subscription software, premium this and that. The average U.S. adult was spending $90 a month on subscriptions, or $1,080 a year. The objects change. The pattern rhymes. Financially free people are not joyless. They avoid buying fragility disguised as reward. They avoid the oversized house and status car. They understand that every unnecessary fixed cost is a little employee you have hired for life. Who gets hurt most when the cycle turns? Not the truly rich, but the middle-class savers, the salaried families, the careful strivers. Go back to Argentina. In 2001, the crisis was grocery lines, pharmacy purchases, and the gap between money owned and money usable. History shows that when systems shake, the person with the lower fixed cost life can bend without breaking. The person whose income is already spoken for has no room left to improvise. Improvisation matters because crises are about timing. A fragile lifestyle is like a violin string wound too tight. It can produce a beautiful note for a while, then it snaps. Who walks away fine? Often the family in the smaller house, the owner of the older car, the worker who did not match every raise with a larger payment. Notice something else. The purchases that do the most damage are often the ones that repeat, the monthly fee, the luxury trim package. These are the status goods that must be refreshed. A recurring fee seems small, but a leak can sink a boat. This explains the final thing financially free people avoid. They avoid the need to look upgraded all the time. They refuse the rule that says a larger income must produce a more visible lifestyle. That rule is marketing with good lighting. In a crisis, flexibility is bargaining power. The person under the smallest monthly pressure often has the clearest head. The historical record shows those who came through with freedom shared simple traits. First, they separated usefulness from display. Grace Groner worked as a secretary, bought 3 shares of stock, and lived in a small cottage. She died worth $7.2 million.